Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
FD friend here. Former hotshot. A forest firefighter. In a woods type of guy. 2009 summer. Out on exercise with our team. Fucking middle of nowhere, Alaska. It's ass. Doing standard hotshot junk and prepping for forest fires. I'm a human Smokey the Bear. Speaking of bears, god damn there are a lot of bears. We've seen bears before, and we're not even really worried about them anymore. Honestly, the bears might think we're one of them at this point. Standard safety precautions are taken, we think little of it since most of us are pretty seasoned. Nighttime comes on day 3, and we can hear bears, somewhere out there, fighting. This isn't unusual, and it doesn't rightly bother us. But then something does. The cries of an injured bear fill the air in the wee hours of the morning, followed by a piercing howl. Not a wolf. Not a deer. Not a moose. No fucking idea what. Not the kind of gentleman to be shaken by the prospect of a cryptid in a woods. And also because we all, in the back of our minds I'm sure, assumed it was a moose. Mess is at sunrise and our work assignments are handed out, and the foreman makes mention to the bears.
If there's an injured bear out there, we need to be careful, because that means there's an even larger bear, or highly aggressive bull moose out here too, and we do not want to fight that.
The day goes as normal, wood cutting, trail marking, prep, so on and so forth. We hear the occasional howl from the bear, which we know is somewhere in the area, but not anywhere we can determine. Lunch mess comes around and a crew of 4 doesn't return with no radio contact. Assignment was to head to a nearby river tributary and collect water samples for the Department of Fish and Game. Volunteer with another 3 to go find them, assume radio's just fucked up. Head down to the river. On the way we distantly hear that same shout from the night before. It echoes through the woods, a high-pitched, positively monstrous call the likes of which I have never heard. It does, indeed, rattle us to the bone a bit. But being the stock of men who think with a measure of rationality, we still all firmly believe it to be a moose or a distorted call from another large animal. We reach the river mouth and spy the crew's gear and 2 of the crew. What are you friends doing? Their radio is dead, sure as shit. The other 2 guys are just upstream a bit and come down. We help them pack and get moving on. As we pack up, one of them shouts out, "Holy fuck, what's that?" He points to a tree line some 200 meters opposite of us. Peeking from the tree line, just barely visible as a head, easily 2.5–3 meters off the ground. All that's really certain is that this is a massive animal. We look on in bewilderment for a moment before it ducks back in the trees. I think that's our moose. Big fucker in it? Return to base with crew in tow. Inform team we saw the moose on the opposite side of the river and it was huge. Team makes note and we advise them to stay clear of unnecessary activity by the river bank, since the moose may be there looking for females to rut, even if it is just past the season. Back to work. Night comes and the familiar sounds of Mother Nature unleashing her great titans on one another fill the air. A storm rolls in around midnight and fills the air with the echoes of a deluge of rain, the kinds of which the Bible tells us swept away the old world. Rolling thunder filled the air and we all learned a bit why the bombing campaign on North Vietnam was named such a thing, and we all were left to silently wonder if the USAF's B-52s could even hope to match how loud this storm was. But even through all that infernal howl filled the air, drowning out even the grandest of Mother Nature's symphonies. At one point in the night, the screams, which had slowly worked their way through the woods, came from what I would say was mere hundreds of meters from our camp, within visual distance surely. When the day began the storm had not subsided but the screams had. Our mental tested but not cracked, our foreman was more inconvenienced with this than anything.
Look, that damn moose is bold. We're going to erect some barriers and we'll put down some repellent, keep it out of the camp. Today's job orders are standard affair, and we'll be coordinating with another hotshot trail maintenance unit coming through today, hosting them this evening, and on their way they'll go.
I'm assigned to the maintenance party, so we go to meet our brethren. The team meets up with us after a few short hours of work. Immediately notice they all look unsettled. What's up, boys?
We found a set of bears about 3 clicks out.
A set?
Like 4.
4?
Dead. Mauled. Absolutely fucking destroyed.
Radio foreman, get permission to go look. Team and us get a move on. We reach an area with some natural rock covering, a good place for bears to live. What we see is nothing I have ever seen before. 4 bears, 3 adults and a single cub, over an area maybe 200 meters, all gored and mauled to death. A pair of trails leading away. The storm made mud of much of this area. 1. A set of tracks headed to our camp, that of a small grizzly. The other, hooves. Large. Bigger than any moose print I have ever seen by an order of magnitude. A typical moose track is 13 to 18 centimeters in length. This is easily 22 to 24 centimeters. What's more is it's slightly more rounded, implying the animal has naturally more mass to it than a moose of a comparable size would. What the fuck is this thing? The bears are gored to death. Heads split, intestines strewn about, chests collapsed. The cub looks like it was simply trampled to death, maybe by the assaulter, maybe by its own in an effort to escape. Whatever this thing is, it's fucking huge. The rest of the day goes as scheduled. Returning to camp, we see a set of barriers have been erected about 4 feet high, and a line of powder has been laid down. Repelling powder is a common part of hotshot crew kit for driving away large predators and other wildlife. Its strong odor is offensive even to humans, but even more so to the olfactory gifted. Night chow is hearty and large portions, more than normal. The night is clear and cool, and we spend time standing around mingling in our impromptu tent city. Just before lights out, the scream is heard in the distance. A panic wave sweeps through the other hotshots.
It fucking followed us.
What?
We've been stalked by that same howl since last week. We thought it ditched us 2 days ago, but it's fucking back.
What is it?
We don't know. We've never seen it. It's been here for about 3 days.
A second scream billows out from somewhere else in the wood. An immediate call is heard after. There's 2 of them. The new foreman is visually shaken. Our foreman, a massive rock on which the waves of many men's troubles have broken, and whose fists have likely broken many more jaws, even seems a bit unnerved by this. We are 40 well-trained, experienced, fit woodsmen. And at the moment I remember hearing that these calls were clearly from 2 different members of the same species, clearly complementary in nature. I felt my heart drop to my feet. An icy shiver ran up my spine. And I reached for my gun. The night was marked with the encroaching calls of these unseen tormentors. Sleep was impossible. Just before sunup, a call came that sent a collective fear through the camp, the likes of which we never felt again. A call from inside the camp. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was bravery, but I looked, and there, in the middle of the camp, silhouetted by meager light, I saw what I can only describe as horror. At its shoulder it was easily 2 meters. Its head was easily 40 centimeters more than that. Atop its twisted head sat a bed of thorn-like outgrowths that I hesitantly call antlers, spanning outwards in a sprawling nightmare. Jagged teeth puzzled its pale brown fire around its face as 4 massive legs carried it, seemingly effortlessly through the rasputitsa with a gentle squish. Its soulless black eyes gleamed with ethereal bewilderment as it seemingly floated through the camp, its hot breath steaming from its elongated snout. The antlers were blackened and glistened with what I could only assume was blood. This was our bear slayer. This was our monster. It had never managed to develop to a point of full fear for me until these last few hours. I seldom had time to process that we could really be dealing with something that defied logic or reasonable explanation before the eldritch horror presented itself to me. I clutched the handle on my Smith & Wesson tightly. The 4.5-inch long, .50 caliber monster seemed much more monstrous when the prospect of defending myself against a bear was my worst-case scenario. But now I was contemplating employing 5 rounds of 400 grain .50 caliber bullets against what might as well have been a dinosaur. Others in my unit looked on, in what I can only describe as a feeling of abject horror and wonder, as the great being walked through our camp, swinging its massive horns side to side, stepped oh so casually over our barrier, and let out a proud yell, continuing in the direction of the other scream. The morning came soon after, but the screams did not stop for some time after. No work orders were handed out that day. There was no mess. There was no movement. We waited to be attacked by 2 great beasts from a land that time forgot. The attack never came. My foreman called in project delay due to wildlife activity, citing wolf packs as being the issue. Who would blame him? No one would ever see a living, breathing god of the forest. The night game and the screams came closer. Those of us with guns clutched them strongly to our chest. Between us we threw more mass in a single 1-second burst than a single 76mm shell did. But we wondered if that could even be enough to stop these things if we had to. Sometime just before midnight they came to our camp. I looked again. For some reason I was less scared this time. It wasn't as horrifying a concept to see our monsters. These two, a male and a female, wandered through our camp casually. Their hot breath issued from their long, jagged mouths, sniffing the air occasionally. The male was the same as the night before, but the female was just slightly less than his in size, without horns. I had neglected to notice it, but the male had tusks, jutting from his lower jaw, at least 1.5 meters long. They strode through the area, mostly silently, for about 20 minutes. As they left, in what was a horrifying display of power, the male's leg struck a medium-weight ATV we use, tipping it over, and pushing it a good 2 meters. Their calls were heard through the night as they wandered away into the wood. Morning came with an unsettling silence. Work orders came. Armed and ready we went about our business. For 2 days after there was no sound, no wildlife but birds and insects singing and buzzing. Satisfied the great beings were gone, we got back to our job. We all agreed, just before we left, this would never go public. Who would believe us, after all? I am convinced what I saw has a logical explanation. They were not horrible, disfigured-looking animals, but their size was absolutely beyond that which I thought possible for any terrestrial animal. They were most certainly a member or relative of the same family as moose or elk, but their size, their tusks, I just don't know. But this is not the end, my friends. 2012. I find myself and 2 former members of the 2009 crew back in the last frontier again. We sat in a restaurant, drinking beer and eating. A trio of state rangers come in, half dressed in uniform. We offer them a seat and drinks, perhaps for some interdepartmental intrigue. We drink ourselves to a fine buzz and begin talking about some of the oddities we encountered in our days. One of the other hotshots looks at us, nods, and starts a story. Summer of 2009. We exchange parts of the story and give equal accounts of what we saw. The rangers, mouth agape each of them, listen in abject enthrallment. After a few moments of silence, one speaks up.
You saw one too.
They've seen them. There's varying reports. Sometimes they have 3 eyes. Sometimes they have 1. Sometimes they talk. Sometimes they imitate voices. Sometimes they eat flesh. Sometimes they just walk and watch. But they are always huge. They always have tusks. And they always scream. The rangers have seen them, and one claims to have shot at one, with no effect. Hunters in the north have claimed to see them for decades, and locals claim them to be forest spirits for centuries. From Anchorage to Dead Horse, sightings of all sorts of these things come in. They aren't repressed, they aren't hidden, but those who do report them get the reports swept beneath the tide of a billion other less credible cryptic reports of seeing something out there. But these things, they're out there. Reminders of a bygone era. Creatures from a time long past, surviving in the Alaskan and Canadian wilderness where men dare not venture. If you see one, you might be blessed, you might be cursed. But don't let them look you in the eye. Or they'll fucking kill you. That seems to be one thing that the myth lives consistently on. Looking at them in the eye is an act of aggression. They don't seem scared of people, just disinterested. The rangers tell us hunters have seen them, and the natives say looking at them makes a man go mad. But they never go near cities. The forest is their home. And they can have it. The closest real thing I have seen to it are the renderings of the Irish great elk, but even it is too small. I could understand how some think, if they see it, it's a very large moose. But the tusks, the antlers, and the call is anything but.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.